Okay, this video is going to cover Chapter 3 of Improving Vocabulary Skills. If you want to follow along in your book, I recommend you do that. Open up to page 16. So here's our words for the chapter. I'll go ahead and read through those and you can try and pick out the parts of speech. So the first one is illusion. The clue there is the S-I-O-N. Altruistic. The I-C at the end is a clue. Appease, there's no clue in that one. Arbitrary, again, no real clue there. Assail, no clue. Banal, there's not really a clue, even though the AL there would, the AL can kind of give you a clue, but it's not a real one. Euphemism, the ISM is actually kind of a clue. Mercenary, no clue there. Syndrome, no clue. And taint. So there's not a lot of clues in this chapter, but let's go ahead and get started. So our first word is illusion, and this one ends in that ION or SION, which makes it a noun. So after I suggested that Monty have fruit for dessert instead of chocolate cake, he responded, "Is that an allusion to my weight?" Ramon didn't have the courage to come right out and ask Leah to marry him. Instead, he made only an allusion to marriage by asking, "Wouldn't it be easier if we just had to fill out one tax return?" So what an allusion is it means a hint about something. So in more detail, on page 16, it's number 3, an indirect reference. Now that's not the greatest definition either. But what an allusion is it's an expression that's designed to call to mind something without mentioning it explicitly. So explicitly means that you're actually saying exactly what you mean. So it's a passing or indirect reference to something, meaning that you're not trying to come right out and say something, but you're hinting at it. So if we take the first example there, the person is saying, "Do you want fruit for dessert?" The Monty is interpreting that as an allusion to his weight, saying like, is the real thing that you're getting at that I need to lose some weight? In the second example, instead of Ramon, coming right out and saying, "Do you want to marry me?" he's basically hinting at it by saying, wouldn't it be easier to fill out one tax return, right? So when you're married, a lot of people file the same tax return. So allusion means that you're hinting at something that you're hoping that the person who is listening to you will understand exactly what it really is that you're really talking about. Okay, so moving on to the next one here, and this one is altruistic. Altruistic is an adjective. That I see at the end is a little bit of a clue. When an enemy approaches, ground squirrels show altruistic behavior. They risk their own lives to give alarm calls to nearby relatives. "I'm not often altruistic," Brett admitted. "I usually put my own interests first." And altruistic means unselfish. Now, if we look at this word, the way that it's pronounced, in the middle of it, it has the sound true. And I don't know if this will help you, but it helps me remember it. Altruistic, when I think of it, I think of someone who's all true. Now, by that I mean is that someone who's always doing the right thing or the correct thing. And that's basically what altruistic means. Altruistic means that you're putting the needs of other people above your own needs. So in the first example, the squirrels, if they're only thinking about themselves, they'd run away without saying anything, because when they say something or when they speak up, they make themselves obvious to the predator so that it's more likely that they will get caught. In the second example, the guy is saying he's not altruistic, meaning that he thinks about himself first. He doesn't put the ideas of others first. On page 17, altruistic is number 10. Unselfishly concerned for the welfare of others, or unselfish. So, but the important thing about this thing, altruistic, is not just that you're unselfish, meaning that you share, but it means that you're actively thinking about what other people need and considering that first before you think about yourself. All right, so moving on to our next one here, which is appease, and this one is a verb. My sister was so outraged when I accidentally dropped and broke her cell phone that nothing I could say or do would appease her. Roger was furious when he saw me out with another guy, but I quickly appeased him by explaining that the date was my cousin. So what appease means is to calm. I think that's a little bit of a not a clear enough definition. So let's look on page 17. And appease is number 6, to calm, especially by giving in to demands. Another way to think about this is to pacify or placate somebody by giving in to their demands. Okay, so the reason why I say that calm is the wrong word, and keep in mind, calm has two meanings. Calm can be an adjective, meaning describing someone, but it can also be a verb, which means to basically to make someone else feel calm, make someone else feel relaxed. So what appease means is that somebody is angry about something, and you do something to make that person less angry. But the thing that you do is basically give them what they want. Now, I don't know how many of you guys are students of history, but I remember in learning about World War II, one of the criticisms, I think, of Winston Churchill was that he appeased Adolf Hitler. So when Hitler invaded Poland, rather than standing up to this aggressive behavior, they gave in to him. They said, "Okay, it's all right if you take that," hoping that it would calm them down. So to appease someone, if you think about it, is not really a good thing or a positive thing, because what it means is that someone is angry and is using their anger to get what they want. So in the first example, well, the first example doesn't work as well, but in the second example where it says Roger was furious when he saw me out with another guy, um, you know, he's using his anger to sort of to control, to control his date, and so she is, doing something to make him calm down, but she's giving in to him. But the question is, should he be angry with her in the first place, or should he trust her? So that when you're appeasing someone, basically, you're saying that the person is using their anger to get what they want, and you're giving it to them. So moving on to the next one, this is arbitrary, and this one's an adjective. Professor Miller's students were angry that he graded their essays in an arbitrary way, rather than using clear-cut standards. Parents should not enforce rules according to their moods. Such arbitrary discipline only confuses children. So arbitrary means impulsive. Um, on page number 17, arbitrary is number 1, determined by personal judgment, not rule or reason based on impulse. So this word impulsive means that someone is acting on their feelings. There's an expression in English, saying that someone goes the way the wind blows. So if they're feeling happy, they're very nice and friendly, and if they're feeling angry, the opposite is true. So when we say arbitrary, we can say that there's an expression in English saying there's no rhyme or reason, meaning that there's no way to predict it because it's not following any any clear pattern, that the thing that is guiding the decision or the choice is either emotion or mood or feeling or something like that. Another way to think of arbitrary is that it's based on random choice or just personal whim, meaning like whatever you're feeling, rather than any sort of reason or any sort of clear system. Okay, so it's not something that you can predict. Okay, so again, arbitrary, like we said before with appease, is rather a negative word. Our next one here is assail, and this one is a verb. The storm assailed us with hail and heavy rain. The two candidates continuously assailed each other with accusations of dishonesty. So what assail means is to attack. But it doesn't just mean to attack. It means to attack in a violent, aggressive manner. So on page 17, assail is number 9, to attack physically or verbally. So in the first example, the storm assailed us with hail and heavy rain. In that case, it's a physical attack, meaning that the storm is hitting us with these things. In the second one, the two candidates continuously assailed each other. In that case, they're not actually fighting, but they're using words to fight. But the important thing about this word assail is that it really has a sense of violence to it. So when you obviously generally when we think of attacking someone, that has violence too, but really the difference there between assail and attack is that assail has is more violent, is more of a violent charge or attack. All right, our next one here is banal, and this is one of those words that everybody always pronounces incorrectly because it looks like banal, but that sounds like the word anal, which is a little bit weird. But I don't think that has anything to do with the reason for the pronunciation. But just keep in mind that the stress is on the second syllable. It's banal, not banal. Because people will probably laugh at you if you pronounce the word that way. So this one is an adjective. The film, with its overused expressions and unimaginative plot, was the most banal I had ever seen. Nice to see you, may be the most banal, pardon me, may be a banal comment, but what it lacks in originality, it makes up for in friendliness. Pardon me. And if we look at the cartoon there, it says, if my paper seems banal, that's because my dad wrote it. And he hasn't had an original thought in years. So what banal means is unoriginal there. It, the meaning of banal, let's look on page 17. Banal is number 7 there. And it says lacking originality, overused, commonplace. Okay, so banal doesn't just mean that it's not original, but not just that it's not original, but it's like something that everybody has already heard before. That it's so commonplace, that it's lacking originality because it's so commonplace, that it makes it incredibly obvious and really boring as a result. So banal is definitely not a compliment. To talk about someone's work or a movie or anything as banal is to say that it doesn't show any originality, and even worse than that, it seems like it's copied from things that are before it. Okay, so moving on, our next one here is euphemism. Euphemism ends in ism, and in general, when you see words like that ending in ism, they're nouns. Now, we talked briefly about nouns can be people, places, things. This one is an idea, right? It's not a person, place, or thing. It's an idea. And most isms that you'll find, I guess all of them, are ideas. So common euphemisms include final resting place for grave, intoxicated for drunk, and powder room for toilet. The Central Intelligence Agency is on record as having referred to assassination with the euphemism change of health. And down here we say a euphemism for toilet is restroom. We call it that. So what a euphemism is it's a term that doesn't offend. Okay, so let me explain that a little bit. First, let's look on page 17 at number 5, which is euphemism. A mild or vague term used as a substitute for one considered offensive or unpleasant. Okay, so euphemism is two things. The first thing is it's a term that means something other than what the words literally mean. And the second thing is that it's referencing or is in reference to something that is unpleasant to talk about. So let's look at the euphemisms that are in the first example. So we say final resting place for grave. So a grave is where you're buried when you're dead. So in general in society, at least in American society, talking about death is not a common thing and is an uncomfortable thing, and may be offensive to some people. So instead of saying grave, you can say final resting place, and in that way avoid offending someone. Now in the second one we say, drunk, calling someone drunk is actually an insult, because drunk has the sense of that you're out of control, and you don't know what you're doing. But saying that someone is intoxicated is less offensive. And the last one is those of you guys who have learned English through British English, you may find it funny that Americans are really uncomfortable, using the word toilet. And and you'll notice if you pay attention to that, most Americans will say, I have to go to the restroom or I have to go to the bathroom, whereas in Britain, they'll say, I need to use the toilet. But for Americans, I mean, that creates the picture of someone, sitting on the toilet, which is, depending on who you're talking to, but for most people, that's not a picture that you want to have in your mind. So that's why we use these euphemisms for toilet. So the restroom is not a place where you take a rest. We call a bathroom we call a restroom a bathroom, even though in public places there's no bath in there. You're not going to take a shower in there. But resting and bathing are just less offensive terms. Another definition for this is a mild or indirect word or expression that's substituted for one considered to be too harsh or blunt when referring to something unpleasant or embarrassing. Alright, so our next one here is mercenary. And this word is a word that you may know already as a noun, a person who is a mercenary, but in this case we're going to look at it as an adjective. Ed is totally mercenary. His philosophy is, pay me enough and I'll do anything. The con man pretended to love the wealthy widow, but he actually married her for mercenary reasons. So mercenary means greedy. Now if you know the word, if you've heard the noun form of a mercenary before, you'll know that a mercenary is a person who gets paid to fight. Normally this is, in a military. So a mercenary would be, someone who's not part of the government army, but the government pays them, and so that person or those people fight for the government. But their main motivation is not, patriotism. Their main motivation is money, and if they aren't getting paid, they'll leave. So the adjective mercenary is related to this because it's talking about when you describe something as mercenary, it means that the only reason that you're doing it is for money. And again, whatever, we do some things only for money, but we wouldn't necessarily describe them as mercenary. But um, mercenary is sort of a negative word, and it means that someone's primary concern is making money, and they are, to go back to an early word, they're amoral about it. They're not concerned about what's right or what's wrong. They only care about the money, so that they're willing to do anything if the price is right. So on page 17, that's number 2. Motivated only by financial gain or greedy. Okay, so moving on to our next one. This one is syndrome, and syndrome is a noun. Headaches are usually harmless, but as part of a syndrome, including fever and stiff neck, they may be a sign of a serious illness. Jet lag is a syndrome resulting from flying long distances. It often includes exhaustion, headache, and a loss of appetite. So what a syndrome is a group of symptoms. So symptoms are specific signs associated with, generally associated with illness or something being wrong. So what a syndrome is it means a bunch of these occurring together, and normally when those things occur together, it indicates a specific disease. Some of you may have heard of the it's not really it's a syndrome called Down syndrome, which is a genetic syndrome. But people who have this syndrome exhibit a number of different symptoms. So for one thing, they tend to be shorter. Their bodies tend to be sort of stockier and heavier. Oftentimes, their eyes are maybe a little bit wider or bigger than that, and they also have some internal syndromes in terms of their level of um, um, intelligence is also affected. Um, but the important thing here about a syndrome is it means that when we call something a syndrome, there's a specific group of symptoms that all go together. Another syndrome you may have heard of is actually AIDS, right? Which is stands for autoimmune deficiency syndrome. Now, there's certain symptoms that are connected that indicate that someone has AIDS. On page 17, syndrome is a group of symptoms typically of a particular disease or condition. All right, so here we are. Our last one here is taint, and taint is a verb. The involvement of organized crime has tainted many sports, including boxing and horse racing. The government scandal tainted the reputations of everyone involved. So taint means to damage. But we got to be more specific than that. Damage means to hurt, but oftentimes when you damage something, it means that it's broken, right? That it doesn't work anymore. Now, taint doesn't have that same meaning. Taint is more that the way that I think about it is that when you taint something, it's like you're giving it a bad smell. It, it means that you're damaging something, but just maybe in a small way that gives a trace of a undesirable quality in there. Another way to think of it is that it's like to contaminate or pollute something. To taint something is more you're just making something more unpleasant. It still works, but it's polluted. It's not clean. It's not perfect. So one of the things we think about the Olympics. With the Olympics, we often say those are tainted by accusations of using performance enhancing drugs. Specifically in the recent in the Rio Olympics. The Russian team, the whole team was tainted by accusations that people were using drugs, and people didn't trust the Russian athletes anymore because this was sort of, as we say, in the air. On page 17, taint is number 8. To stain the honor of someone or something. So that's actually a better word than to damage, is to stain, right? If you think about you're getting a stain on your shirt, um, it doesn't make the shirt not work, but it doesn't look as good. So it has that sense of it's just not perfect anymore. It's dirty. There's just something a little bit off about it. Okay. All right. So make sure to do the exercises in the book, or do the online exercises and the questions, and then bring any questions that you have to class. All right. Take care. Bye.